Hey everybody, Professor Malott here, and today I want to talk to you about the multimodal project. Now, if you're a student in my class, I always assign a multimodal, I like to call it a remix or a recast, and in one of the resource videos that I posted from Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition, they call it a remediation. So essentially, what this multimodal project involves is kind of putting a spin on presenting information in a different way. So, multimodality, you've probably heard that before, maybe not quite understanding it, or maybe in your mind it equates to something that's multimedia, right? We've heard multimedia a lot. TV, music, that kind of stuff is all considered multimedia. And the reason we call it that is we're using very many different approaches to presenting information and communicating. So we also, in rhetoric and composition, call it multimodality. And what that takes us to are the five different modes. I think there's five different modes of communication. So I'm going to share my screen here for one of the resources that I will link below in the description box. Again, this is an open educational resource from the University of Mississippi Rhet Lab. And this reading talks about the five different modes. We have visual, things relating to sight, things that you see. So I'm not going to give examples because the reading really does a great job for it. Oral, having to do with hearing, things that you hear, things related to sound. Gestural, I do it all the time, including things like facial expressions, hand gestures, body movement, that kind of thing. Linguistic refers to written and spoken words, language. Sometimes it's called alphabetic. And then we also have spatial, right? How things are arranged in space, right? And in space, not like outer space, but in an area. So it could be spatial arrangement on the screen, on a page, or in a physical space. So yeah, take a look at the five modes. I think that's a really good reading that explains the various modes that come into this multimodal remix or remediation project. So in my classes, I assign a multimodal project. And how you go about doing this is figuring out, you can take something. Usually I ask students to take a look at their existing research paper that they wrote earlier in the semester. That way they were not doing new research or looking into something new. And so it's easier for them to do this multimodal project. You could do it on a totally new project or new topic if you wanted to, but the idea here is to transform that previous research into a new genre aimed at a different audience that you want to reach. So it seems easy on the surface, but it's actually a kind of a complicated. Well, you just need to know a variety of steps that you need to take in order to complete the project. So one of the things I do, one of the preliminary assignments that I have my students do, this is essentially the brainstorming, the thinking part of getting all the ducks in a row before they actually get down to doing the project itself, is to do a design brief. So a design brief can really help you to figure out what it is that you want to present in your multimodal project, right? So you want to decide on your topic. You want to be clear whether it's a recast of research that you've done previously or if it's a completely new project for you or a new topic for you. Then you want to think about your multimodal format. Decide how you want your project to take form. So I have a list of requirements that my students must meet in order to do the multimodal project. So they might think that a PowerPoint is super duper easy, but I'm very particular in how students should do a quality PowerPoint presentation, Prezi presentation, Google Slides, whatever slide presentation it is. So I have some suggestions for possible formats. And again, if you are in a different kind of class where they're asking you to do a multimodal project, it might not be an English class, it could be a history class, science class, what have you. Think about the various formats. You could do a video presentation similar to what I'm doing here. You could make an interactive website. You could create a podcast with accompanying visuals. So again, it could be, a video podcast where you have your microphone and you do the whole podcast thing, or it could just be an audio podcast. You could create an infographic or a series of infographics for your topic, a digital story or an animation if you are more artistically or into digital media. That could definitely work for you, or you could consider some other kind of format or genre. So you want to consider a format that's best conveying your topic and engaging your audience that you intend to reach. And then in your brief, usually it's about a paragraph or so, include the following sections. So who are you trying to reach, right? Who is your audience and what's your purpose? Again, looking to the rhetorical situation here. Who do you hope to reach and why? And then talk about the multimodal elements. How is each mode going to contribute to conveying your message? Now, that does not mean that you have to use all 5 modes, but typically we have a blend of about 2 or 3 different modes. So I want you to think about any visual elements you might have, things like images, charts, graphics to illustrate your points, any kind of oral elements. So are you going to do a voiceover narration for your PowerPoint slides? Are you going to conduct interviews? Is there going to be some kind of background music to enhance engagement for your audience? Likewise, think about the digital elements. Is there any kind of interactive feature like hyperlinks, URLs, any kind of animations or embedded videos that might provide a more dynamic experience? Then I want you to think about the technical requirements. And this is where students are like, oh, PowerPoints are easy, or doing a video is easy. Everybody does them on their phones, right? But if you don't have the skill set, you might not have the time to learn that new skill. So think about any of the technical tools or software that you might need. If you already have it on your phone or your computer, that's fantastic. If you know how to use it, the easier it's going to be. So if you know how to edit videos, fantastic. If you know how to create a website, awesome, right? There are free tools out there. There are apps out there that can help you to do these things. But again, there is a learning curve. So you have to take that into account as far as how much time you might have to spend on your project and that kind of thing. And then, of course, you want to anticipate any kind of potential challenges you might face and how you could possibly address them. So coming up with a design brief, coming up with a plan for your project is key to having a really good multimodal project. So again, think about the genre, right? Think about your audience. Think about the purpose. Why are you doing it, right? Not just to get the grade in the class, but you should have some other underlying purpose, right? You have a message that you want to convey to a particular audience. So how best can you do that? Is it through print media? Is it through visual stuff? Is it through audio stuff? Is it through, images and that kind of thing? What kind of modes do you think would be best to convey your message to your intended audience, right? So the audience hopefully is not just your instructor and your classmates, but a bigger audience out there, right? If you were to publish this thing, if you were to put it out there in the world, who do you want to reach? And then, of course, plan the project using your design brief, create the multimodal project, of course, always taking into account your skill set, and the amount of time that you have to devote to the project. So knowing well in advance when your due dates are there drafts due, that kind of thing? Are there any other preliminary steps that you have to fulfill that might be graded in your class? And of course, to submit it, your final project, and if there are any kind of supplementary materials that help the person who's assessing your work to understand if that's indicated by your instructor. So if you have a script that goes along with your video, or if there are storyboards, or if there's a draft or something like that, you might want to include that supplementary materials. So yeah, and the thing I like the most about doing these multimodal projects and having students work on these multimodal projects is that they are able to use skills that transfer into their careers, right? So this gives you an opportunity to do something different than the typical written essay, right? Of course, that's also an option for students. Writing, because it is, of course, a composition class, writing is still, of course, an option. Let me just open up this multimodal project requirements just to show you and give you an idea of what some of the requirements for written work for my classes. So things like essays, a magazine, a creative writing piece, a blog, an article. One semester, I had a student who recasted their research on, I think the topic was love, the science of love and attraction, and she wrote a series of poems. And I was floored because it was wonderful work. So written work typically 4 to 5 pages, 1,000 to 1,500 words. Poetry is a little bit different. I'm asking students to have 4 to 5 poems, each on a separate page. And this is similar to the process if you were to submit your poetry for publication. Of course, you don't double space when you're writing poetry. And of course, think about correct use of citations. If you stick with the academic essay, you're going to be using in-text citations, parenthetical reference. If you're doing something a little bit more digital, like a web page or a magazine, a zine, a blog post, an article, you want to make sure that you know how to create functioning hyperlinks within the text, as well as having a list of references at the bottom. And of course, I have recommendations for drafts. Audiovisual work, things like slide presentations, a video or a short film, a vlog, a podcast, interviews with people. The general guideline here is 10 to 12 minutes in length, or about 10 to 15 slides. And again, correct use of citations. If it's audio, you would mention the author according to so-and-so. For slides, you use a citation at the bottom of the slide. And I have a link here that shows you how to do that per MLA guidelines. You want to keep in mind that your audio visual presentation needs to be appealing to your audience. So you're going to use relevant images on your slides, royalty-free music, or if you wish to pay for music, or if you create music yourself, you could use your own music. Make it as professional as possible. It's not the easy way out. I cannot stress that enough. There's a lot that goes into creating an audiovisual presentation. Sometimes it's helpful if you're doing a PowerPoint presentation to have some kind of a script that you're speaking from. In my presentations here, usually don't use a script. Sometimes I do if I want it to be a little bit more professional. I tend to speak off the cuff, but that's just my style. If you do an interview, you need to make sure that you have a person's permission, all of those kinds of things. There are other visual alternatives like artwork, brochures, and posters. So you can, again, read through some of these things here, make sure that the image files are acceptable and easily accessible for people. PNG and JPEGs tend to be the most easily accessed ones. Brochures and posters can also be saved as PDFs. Canva has a free version, and that's a wonderful software website where you can do a lot of wonderful digital creations. So that's something that you could also take a look at. Another thing that I have left open for students, especially if they are education majors, is a teaching unit. A lot goes into creating a lesson and a lesson plan. So think about creating a 15 to 20-minute lesson or a micro lecture on your chosen topic. And things you would think about is, how would I teach this in a class? How am I going to organize the information? What kind of visuals or handouts might I need to enhance them? Is that something I'm going to create myself, or can I find those resources elsewhere? And would I develop some kind of a learning activity for students? I do have a link to a lesson plan template. I'm not crazy about it just because I use a different type of template when I'm teaching an in-person class. So, and again, there's also the opportunity, you could teach a portion of the lesson on video if you wanted to, if that's easier. But coming up with the lesson plan itself and all of the various elements that relate to that lesson is, again, another multimodal way of presenting the information to a different audience. So hopefully this helps you a bit to think about multimodality, to think about how you best want to present your information to an intended audience, right? Think about the audience, think about who you want to reach and what your message is, and what would be the best way to appeal to that audience. So you're bringing in a little bit of the things you've learned in rhetorical analysis, learning about the various rhetorical appeals. How are you going to use those to your best advantage to reach your audience? That's it for multimodality. Take care, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Bye-bye, everybody.